sign my name from now on with 2 little stars after it.
For some reason, my parish priest didn't like that joke. I don't know why.
You're online.
Okay, so we have a couple minutes before the beginning of the meeting. We've got Director Goheen, Director of Finance Tyndall, Director of, oh, there's Director of Planning, and then we have Director Goodman and the Fire Chief, and we've got the CAO. Who else are we missing here? We're missing Mr. Grell. Oh no, Mr. Grell's up top. Okay, 1, 2, 3. I just want to make sure we're all here. Go ahead, Councillor Fody. Oh, he's not unmuted.
There we go. Sorry about that. We need to correct the name on our fire chief. Otherwise, he's going to be misrepresented as Brian Maybe.
Oh, good point. Can you do that, Madam Clerk? Is that something you can do? Okay. I should assume that from the last meeting when we all showed up as Brock Gorell. Okay, so, and 6. Okay, so I guess what we'll do here, I've got my motions in front of me. Is there anything else? And I've got my notes here. Okay, we'll just wait for 1 more minute and then we'll begin the meeting. We are not popular this evening, folks. There's no attendees yet. Yet being the operative word. So I guess we're on live on YouTube. Sorry, my hair's driving me a little nuts tonight. So we will get this meeting started. We'll call this meeting to order at 6:30 on June 8th, 2020, council meeting. And Madam Clerk, if you can play the national anthem and we'll all stand. I think we've been having trouble, you've been playing it, but we don't hear it on our end. So I don't know, we've all been very good about standing and listening. So I don't know if it's because your microphone's turned off.
Shouldn't be, but I'm also sharing my screen. So if you watch the screen, then in case you can't hear it.
Okay.
One of these, maybe. Come on. Bear with me.
That's all right. We could all just sing. Oh, there we go. But Councillor Ohlke said no. That's all right.
But it mutes both of them.
Okay, we need to exit one.
Well, let's not one. Let's do.
Okay, you may be seated. Okay. Okay, and number 3 on the agenda is declaration of interest or general nature thereof. Does anyone have, Councillor Ohlke, you have a declaration? If we can just unmute Mr. Ohlke. There we go. Councillor Ohlke?
Yes, in the matter of planning report number PL 017-20, zoning bylaw amendment, application Zulu-2020-003, Thomas Road. I have to recuse myself in all matters and all aspects of the planning report and any subsequent discussions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Will, Madam Clerk, will Councillor Ohlke be able to leave the meeting, or will he just have to leave the room? And can he rejoin? I
We'll
just don't know
do
which
like
one.
What we asked Councillor maybe to do, and yourself during the committee of adjustment, if Councillor Ohlke can just leave his room or
Okay.
leave the view, so he can't participate or see him.
And you'll have his microphone muted as well, so he
Yeah.
can't actually add
Yeah.
anything. Okay, that's absolutely fine.
And
as
then
long as
rather that than him actually leaving and having to.
Fine by me, as long as it meets our guidelines, that's what I'm concerned with. Are there any other declarations of special interest or thereof, or general nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll move on with the consent agenda. So the adoption and or receipt of minutes. So the first motion on the floor is moved by Councillor Foti and seconded by Councillor Maybe that the May 11th, 2020 council meeting minutes be adopted as circulated / amended. Any discussion on this motion? Councillor Grell? Go ahead.
Okay, just regarding that COVID-19 CBS 017-20, we had left it that it was postponed to June 1. So it's not so much the minutes, but procedurally, do we need to wrap that up at some point because we had postponed it? Do we procedurally need to tonight make any statements or resolution to that fact? Thank you.
Madam Clerk, from a procedure point of view, can we provide an update in other business, or what do we need to do to tie a bow on that?
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, CAO Donachie, that staff were still working on it. But if we can pass another motion to defer.
That would suffice for us?
Yeah.
Well, we'll maybe get further into that later on in the meeting, and then that'll maybe decide. But thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Gorell. That's a good point. Any other questions or queries or concerns with the meeting minutes as circulated, amended? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. Raise your hand. All those against? None. And the motion passes. Okay. Next on the agenda is motion put forward by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Foti, that council approve the staff reports as presented at the June 1st, 2020 committee of the whole meeting. Any discussion on this motion? Councillor Jameson.
Just want to make sure in my own mind with respect to delaying the payment, that my understanding is the notices will still go out at the same time. And am I getting that right?
Ms. Goodman, do you want to speak to, I believe you're talking about the grant recipients?
Sorry, I thought we were dealing with an omnibus. I apologize. Sorry, I'm looking too far down the page. Apologize. I'm just asking about the tax collection delay. So when we get there, we get there. Sorry, I apologize.
That's okay. So the motion on the floor is that council approve the staff reports as presented at the June 1st meeting 2020 committee of the whole meeting. Are there any questions or concerns in regards to this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed? Carried. Okay. The next items on the agenda are the information items. So there's a few letters that we've received. Sorry, I'm trying to get through agenda in the wrong section here. So community business services report, CBS LeBoat. Oh, sorry, those are information items. Yes. So are there any questions in regards to these information items that are on the table? Councillor Maybe?
Thank you, Your Worship. And my question is that, so they have pulled out for this season by what it sounds like and pulled away from the dock and the agreement that's already at hand. And is there any fuel on site and or sewage equipment that is our ownership apart to theirs, and any other equipment that might be deemed as theirs opposed to the townships? Thank you.
Ms. Goodman, you want to speak to that?
There we go. Certainly, and through you, Your Worship. The fuel system has not been installed at this time. Of course, if they were, I think, struggling to make ends meet, I think taking on additional capital work was outside of their purview for this year. The waste disposal system has not been deployed this year. Of course, early at the onset of the year, I believe Director Goheen had taken the appropriate steps to initialize it should it be required for this year. Otherwise, they have no equipment on site, and we have asked that they remove all signage from the office for this year.
Any further, Deputy Mayor Lackey?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, we've taken on an amazing responsibility financially to do all this stuff, and I understand the circumstances. Moving forward, we've got a $30,000 sewage removal device. We've put in, even though there's no fuel in it, we've put that in. We've gone to great lengths for this company. Are they willing to negotiate some of this back? Because this is on the backs of the taxpayer, and it certainly hasn't come to fruition. It didn't go through the right way, and so now we're not going to see the fruits of the labor. So I guess I want to know where we go from here.
Certainly, and through you, Your Worship, we are still in the process of looking at a more formal agreement with them for 2021 and beyond, in a term that matches the existing agreement we have for rights to use the harbor with Fisheries and Oceans Canada. So we are still in the process of trying to line up those pieces so that we can still realize some revenue from their joining with us or partnering with us, and the broader benefits that it would bring.
Follow up, Councillor Lackey or Deputy Mayor Lackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wouldn't say that the first contract was all that great. So can we look at this at greater lengths moving forward?
I believe that Director Goodman and the CAO have been looking at making that agreement much more robust, and that will come to council for our approval prior to finalization.
Absolutely.
Okay. Councillor Gorell, you had a question? And then Councillor Ohlke.
Thank you. And following up on Deputy Mayor Lackey's concerns, with our memorandum of understanding that was in place previously when it was the negotiation with LeBoat was begun, is there any cancellation clause, penalties, whatever, for reclaiming any of this? Because I read here that they have canceled. They have decided that there will be no revenue coming our way. I find that very curious. And I just wonder, I'm sure going forward we can take care of that, but was there anything written in the previous agreements? Thank you.
CAO Donachie, if you'd like to speak to that.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. The MOU was rather vague on a number of points. There is no specific termination, cancellation kind of uncoupling costs provided in there. So, you know, in keeping with the tenor of the agreement, just would have been surprised if it got to that detail.
Thank you, CAO. Councillor Burrell, or sorry, Councillor Ohlke, you would like to ask a question?
Yes, I remember there was quite a to-do about fuel, and it probably links back to what the deputy mayor was saying. The quarters and proximity to residences down by that dock, there were other merchants there, marina owners, at least one that could perhaps have provided the fuel contract, but nothing happened. They put fuel pipes in, and no Bowser was left on site, and there's no fuel tanks there, which is probably a good thing. I wonder if in this whole process that detail could be attended to as well. Just my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Ms. Goodman, you want to speak to that?
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I mean, that's the one, I think, benefit of this having happened as a result of COVID. Of course, you know, it's unfortunate that we're seeing tourism operators be impacted by this, but I think it allows us a little bit more time to kind of make sure that we're working with our legal team to develop a comprehensive and strong agreement that offers the maximum amount of protection, not only to the municipality, but also to LeBoat, and pursue options such as, you know, neighborhood marinas that might be able to offer a similar service.
Thank you, Ms. Goodman. Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I believe today's announcement actually talked about tour boat and people being able to come down and visit the Thousand Islands again by tour boat. Does LeBoat also fall on that as a tourist pleasure craft kind of thing? As of Friday, they can be back in business. So are they going to be trying to reestablish their connections here in the township? Thank you.
I'll let the CAO address that. He's put his hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. LeBoat, I haven't the specifics of whether LeBoat falls within the tour boat category. They had indicated to us earlier in the season that they had seen essentially any foreign reservations evaporate. Given the restrictions that are on for travel and whatnot, they're drawing upon a smaller pool of potential renters, basically local people in Ontario, to draw upon. So I would imagine that they may have some challenges filling up their slots, but who knows for sure.
Okay, so any further questions in regards to any of the information items? Nothing in regards to operations report OPR-013-20. That's the impacts of the waste label moratorium on the waste disposal site operations. I'm tripping over my tongue here. Apologize. Deputy Mayor Lackey.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. You are going to bring that up at your next meeting with the emergency measures. How did that go?
So that's where the report actually came out of. So one of the concerns that was brought up at the emergency control group was the fact that our waste disposal sites have been, I don't want to, the overuse is not the right term, but the use has exploded during COVID, and having the free garbage availability, while definitely something that was necessary, I think at the time for immediate relief. I think Director Goheen's report and Ms. Tyndall's information in regards to the finance side of things speaks to what that costs us as a taxpayer, as taxpayers in this municipality over the long run. So I think what it comes down to is that while we can look to change that or revert back to allowing free bags of garbage, but what that actually does is put further significant pressure on the cost of running these landfill sites, as they've been oversubscribed because of the free garbage that was allowed. up until now. And that would further put pressure on the tax rate possibly in coming years. So Director Goheen, did you want to maybe say it a bit more eloquently than I did? Your report was very detailed in regards to the costs and the potential increases that we're faced with due to the additional use during the COVID period.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Really, you said it very, very well. We have experienced significant increase in trips to our sites. And as I indicated in the report, these sites have a finite lifespan. So the message really needs to be that each of the ratepayers has a certain responsibility for the remaining lifespan of those facilities, and that really there should be some ownership, I guess, of what we're putting in there. But you're absolutely correct. The costs that we're seeing now, and it's difficult to annualize those costs and project them to the end of the year. But the bottom line is that we'll pay at some point when these sites fill up and they need to be closed, and then what happens after that. So really the message is that we've seen increased volumes, and there is an impact financially and environmentally on that having occurred.
Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Mady.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, there's always, there's been a plan for a long time on the closure, whether it's, it depends on the engineer you talk to, how many years it's going to be. And it took us a long time to come up with, whether it's $1 or $1.50 or $1.25 for a ticket. It took us a long time to get people to bring their waste to the waste site instead of putting it in our ditches. I see more and more that waste is going in our roadsides. So now I guess we've sort of spoiled that balance. We've given them the free, and now we want the big bucks again to put our garbage in the landfill. We threw out that balance, and I just hope we don't see more roadside garbage and burning couches and that type of thing in our ditches. And I would hope that our Public Works staff will take note of that.
So Director Goheen, I'll let you respond to that, and then I'll recognize Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yet to your point, Mr. Deputy Mayor, about the roadside dumping, we have actually seen a relatively significant increase in that as well over the course of the moratorium. And that's somewhat difficult to explain, I think, considering it really costs nothing at that, to deposit those 4 bags. But it is also worth noting that we are seeing or had seen quite an uptick in roadside dumping.
That's unfortunate. So I'll recognize Councillor Maybe, then Councillor Floody. I apologize.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a few questions. First, number one, I believe that we are in still a state of emergency. As much as dollars speak, I think until the state of emergency is gone, we shouldn't be changing our policy on the 4-bag limit and free, because again, we aren't going to be in a state of emergency all our time, all our life, as well as there's still people who aren't working. And wasn't this why we actually did this, is to help the people that can't afford it, to make sure the garbage got to the dump? And as well as is our increase in the dump also non-residents? Is the garbage going in the ditches from non-residents? Can we double check that and see how that is? If that's possible, it would be nice to know that answer. But I still think we need to maintain our 4-bag limit until the end, which is what, 2-3 weeks away, whatever it is. One way or the other, we're going to pay for it anyways. Whether we get the money now, get the money later, it's all going to work out in the wash, and we'll all pay for it because we're all taxpayers regardless. Another question I had is the wood residue, because we can't burn it anymore, it's chipped. What actually happens to those chippings? Do they stay in the landfill? Are they reprocessed, taken somewhere like at Joyceville? to put in with their recycling process that they make mulch for? And is that something that is possible in the future to actually do? And I guess that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Director Goheen, did you want to speak to the mulching?
Sure, yeah, no problem, Your Worship. And I will also add that I believe one of the main intents of putting in place that label moratorium was so that the ratepayers didn't have to go to the store to get them during the early times of the pandemic. That was also a factor that played into that decision. And with respect to the wood waste, it is used on site. We do mix it and it does become intermediate cover material. It's not necessarily as good as using the sand fill material that we would typically use. It is used on site. I've not investigated taking it off site, whether the Norterra facility would take it and what the logistics and costs are to transporting it. Certainly would be an item for our waste management plan that we will eventually undertake.
Okay, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, just a few comments. I agree with our Director of Operations. I think my take on the original free garbage bag allotment was to stop the interaction of buying the tickets, interacting with our staff at the dump and so on. Councillor maybe has a good point in the sense that we only got a few more weeks of perhaps under the emergency state. So just for consistency's sake, we can follow through. Excuse me. My flip side is the residents need not fool themselves. This is a free garbage. There's nothing free about any dump site. If we're not paying for the garbage bag ticket price now, we'll pay dearly about a new landfill. So if we don't keep that money flowing coming into the township coffers here, and that landfill continues to fill quicker than we expect, then there will be a real dear price to pay shortly down the road. But that's a discussion for another day. I think my biggest take on this increase to our landfill site was a direct relationship to the cleanup throughout our whole township. I think the people that were off work, the weather was conducive. We had an early spring, a relatively dry spring, and I can't help but notice, quite frankly, the pristine appearance of a lot of places. I think people took this time and they made use of it. They made use of the free dumping, if you will, at our waste site facilities. And I think, quite frankly, we're better off because of it all. I mean, they really did clean up a lot of sites. There's still enough work left for our bylaw enforcement officers, but that's a different kettle of fish. Thank you.
Councillor Jameson, I'll recognize you and then we'll move forward with this report and the motion that's on the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. My observation, spending some time at the dump, is that the unintended consequence of trying to ensure our residents were getting a break is the volume that hit it, but also the landfill itself, not the recycling, but just the landfill itself seemed to be catching all kinds of material that are not supposed to be in the landfill. So we've got in my view, more than a problem with just the volume that went in, but what has gone in. And I think the sooner we're back to the program and get people adjusted to the program, the better. But also looking ahead, we need to have some sort of discussion about access, controlled access, and how our employees, because it isn't fair to them, they are not policemen, they're not bylaw enforcement officers. My sense is they're doing the best they can, but it's been quite a lawless, if you will, environment at our dump. And I say that as someone that's made a point of going out there several times over the last few weeks just to see the behaviors and the use of it. So I guess, accuse me of being the law and order guy, but I would like to see it tightened up and our employees have an access and in and out access control of some kind as we move forward, if we're going to manage these sites for the longer term, or we're just going to fill them very quickly and find ourselves in trouble down the road, as Councillor Fody is alluding to. Thank you.
Okay, so this motion that's on the floor is moved by Councillor Fody and seconded by Councillor Maybe, that information items be received and filed. So there's no motions coming unless you want to make a motion that's coming out of these operations report, which we can absolutely entertain at a later date or later in the meeting. Is there any further discussion on the information items received? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion at hand, please signify. All those opposed? Carried.
Madam Mayor, who was the mover and seconder on that?
That was Councillor Fody was the mover and the seconder was Councillor Maybe. And the I got that right. Got that back. So the next motion on the floor is moved by Councillor Fody and seconded by Councillor Maybe, that council thank Howard Allen and of Allen and Partners for his presentation of the 2019 audited financial statements. Did any one of the councillors have anything further to ask or query in regards to the audit as it was presented last week at Committee of the Whole? I'll just take this opportunity again to thank the Finance Department and specifically the Director of Finance, Kate Tyndall, for her attention to detail and for basically having a lot of these recommendations that come out of the audit already in place or already on the list to be in place. Just gives us more confidence to know that our treasurer is definitely there and moving things along as they should be. So we appreciate that, Madam Treasurer. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed? And that carries. Okay, next motion on the floor is moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Fody, that council thank Ms. Lawley for the library board presentation and that council approve the library board budget 2020 budget request in the amount of $423,401. Any discussion on this motion? Deputy Mayor Lackey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to the rest of council. I realize this has been a stressful situation and, you know, we want to get underway, but I think this is a drastic mistake to pass this budget. We were trying to scrimp and save in all areas, and here we are passing a library board budget, which once we do, we will have no control over, which doesn't reflect many savings. Yes, they've done a little here and a little there. To me, I'm sorry, but I'm not in favor of this motion, and I will not support it. I believe we need to carry on and let council and our treasurer look over things as they go along, because once we open that floodgate, they can take that money again and spend as they wish.
Councillor Jameson, and then Councillor Fody, and then Councillor Ohlke.
I'm coming at it from a different point of view than the deputy mayor, but same outcome. But I just like a minute to explain because the heat has been on all week, but I've taken the time. I certainly make it clear that obviously I don't think there's anybody around the table that doesn't support having libraries. I respect the abilities of the volunteers, and I certainly appreciate Councillor Ohlke's efforts to professionalize the environment. I had a long conversation with Gord, and I really appreciate that. I can't support it. I would rather defer it and continue, not so much because we really can't manage the library finances, but perhaps slow down some of the aspects of it. And the reason I oppose it really is I don't trust the numbers because I don't think the checks and balances are there. 194,000 was accrued over several years without, from what I understand, the permission of council to retain that. And yet it's now, then it came back, and then another 53 is coming back. So that tells me the checks and balances in the general undertaking of budgeting as well as expenditures are not there. Now, I know the Library Act is a challenge. Library Act is a terrible constitution and bylaws in the not-for-profit area, but it's what we have. But as a result, the board in that constitution and bylaw doesn't have the tools. So it's fine for us to criticize the board, but that act does not provide them with the tools to ensure that management is doing their job and the duty of care. The other thing I noticed in the, and we all noticed it, I'm sure, in the financial statements, was that the money that came back to us was going into a reserve fund, a building reserve fund. And I made some queries about that and learned that, in fact, it's gone into our general capital reserve. It is not designated for a particular use by the library board down the road. So that is the good news, because in the event that we had a challenge with a bridge, we could fix the bridge if we needed to use that money. And we are in financial straits with respect to the COVID crisis, which is not going away anytime soon, notwithstanding suddenly, people think it's over. So that is another clue to me that there is not an understanding of the checks and balances with respect to what you do with the money. The other thing is, and this is to the deputy mayor's point, we have said to the township staff that we want a discipline and we want to focus around planning for the worst. And I think we're going to see I personally believe we're going to see some negative issues down the line for which money may need to be available. So it isn't so much as I'm not beating up on the library. I just want to see checks and balances and a management discipline. And I would like us to help the board do that. And in the motion that I put forward later, and I'll speak to that, is really anticipating more financial challenges for us as a municipality that are far greater than the library itself. So those are the points I wanted to make, which is the reason why I will not support the budget for the library. Thank you.
Councillor Foti.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Before we go any further, I'd like to ask our CIO and our clerk, is this not what we voted on the last meeting to pass the budget? I'm a little surprised this question's coming up again tonight. I thought our 4-3 vote last week was to pass the budget for the library.
I believe, thank you, Worship, through you. I believe the vote was for the committee of the whole to recommend that council pass the budget.
Okay, thank you.
So under the process, we discuss at committee of the whole, and then we approve at council. So that's why you see the
I'm aware. Thank you. I just wanted that clarification. I'm aware of that process, Your Worship. Okay. It's just that we as a council had asked the library, we had told them that we're going to prolong them the number of months we did until they come back with a proper budget through the tedious work of our Councillor Ohlke on that board and others through our financial department, I suppose, guided all that. I could argue both sides of this argument. I have no problem criticizing the library for all their shortcomings, and there are plenty, as Mr. Jameson and Deputy Mayor Lackey had alluded to. On the other hand, my biggest problem is the fact that we had asked this of them, that they come back with the exact, type of proposal that they did. And, being a person of word, if I've asked somebody to do something, they do it, I think it's only prudent that we accept it. Watching over it is a totally different thing. I will be the first one to jump all over this. I know I won't be the first. I have lots of colleagues who might beat me to it. But I think the library board with the 4-3 vote last week, what happens tonight remains to be seen. But I think the library board would be foolish, or foolhardy, I should say, to think that we are backing away from this just because they presented this proposal. There are many, many questions, as Councillor Jameson alluded to. The numbers, I threw a question out there last week that was, quite frankly, poorly answered when it came to finances, and there are many others. But I'm going to stand on the side of passing this tonight in the sense that they came back with what we asked them to do. If we had no intentions of giving them free reins to try and operate as a functioning board, then quite frankly, what were we giving them slack for in the last 3 months or 4 months to prolong the effort to bring forward a financial proposal? I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Councillor Ohlke and then Councillor Gorell. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I'll echo much of what Councillor Fody has said in terms of our integrity as a council. We asked people to do something, they did it. Now it's not the time to turn around and kick somebody in the teeth. Now, I want to talk a bit about history. That $194,000 should not, in any case, have been put in the hands of the library board to begin with. I will point out that there was a mayor sitting on that library board at that time, as well as another councillor. Enough said about that. That money's been recovered. The library board did not spend $53,000. They spent less than $53,000 of their last levy and returned it. It seems to me we just had an auditor tell us that wherever we could generate a surplus, please do so. They did that. We are in about a quarter of the year what their levy would have been had we passed it right at the start. So a lot of this money has already been expended, or a portion of it's already been expended. My sense of working on this board is that they're not profligate. No one's going to be riding around in private Corvette cars to get to meetings or anything like that, or all the nightmare scenarios or outlandish things that people could come up with. They are prudent people. They want to operate professionally. They want to do the right things. They are entertaining other options for library service. And they're not sure what the exact future is, as neither are we. I doubt they will spend all of this money. I suspect they'll be returning a significant portion of it at the end of the year, as will perhaps some of our other departments. So again, to reinforce what my dear colleague, Councillor Fody has said, we asked them to do something. It was not easy for them to change culture because there was a huge sea state in culture when our council came in compared to the last one. Other people noticed that too. We asked them to do something. They turned to with a certain amount of difficulty, and they've done it. So I'll leave it there. I will vote in support of this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ohlke. Councillor Gorell.
Thank you. It's to you, Your Worship. I will support this motion and this budget because what is unclear to me, what is clear to me, first of all, is that it looks to me like they've made an honest strike at trying to address the issues that this council and staff had put to them. And yes, we could nickel dime this to death, but it still doesn't put us in any better position. It's just a set of numbers on paper. We could say, reduce it by 10%, whatever. We don't understand all the nitty gritty of that budget that they put together. It's an acceptable budget. And on a final note, I am not happy, and I haven't been for since I've been on council, that I have the records here in front of me of the amount of money that was pumped into those reserve funds that they did, and it's appalling, frankly. They were up to 412,000. We keep talking about the 194 that we forced them to return. There's still a ton of money sitting out there in those reserve funds that it still seems unaccountable. I'm sure it's still there somewhere, but we need to get on with passing this budget. Otherwise, we're not accomplishing anything. What's the criteria? Do we just keep beating them over the head and say, hey, that's not good enough. We need lower, we need lower, we need lower. I didn't see anything in there about hours of service. I'm going to trust the board. We have to trust them somewhere. They seem like they've gotten a message. So I just don't understand, if we didn't pass it, how we move forward. Are we going to, we don't have the right, we do not have the right under the act, as I read it, to scrutinize. We either approve a budget and they follow the budget, that's what the act says, or they come back and they ask for an amendment. I'm going to trust the board this year and see where it goes. And then I reserve the right as a councillor to be pretty tough next year if they don't get the message. Thank you.
Councillor, maybe?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I also support this, as I did last week when it came up. And again, they are going to be in front of us again in about 4 months with a brand new budget. And I believe we will be going over it even finer than this last one. So they know that we're on their case. Their due diligence is required, and we will get a better budget next year, I am sure. Thank you.
Okay, so I believe everybody's had a chance to speak to this now, so I will call the question. All those in favor of that council thank Ms. Lawley for the library board presentation, and that council approve the library board 2020 budget request in the amount of $423,401, please signify with your hand up for a yay, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. All those in a nay position, please put your hand up. 3, and the motion passes. Okay. Carried. Sorry. Maybe. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Just want to get my paperwork correct here. And next on the agenda, and my iPad is dead, so I'm gonna have to go to a different agenda. Next motion on the floor is moved by Councillor Fody and seconded by Councillor Maybe, that council approves zoning bylaw amendment attached to planning report. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Councillor Ohlke is muted and he has left the room. That was the conflict of interest. So thank you very much. I guess he jumped right out of his seat. Moved by Councillor Fody, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that council approve the zoning bylaw amendment attached to planning report number PL-017-20 as Exhibit E to rezone a portion of the subject property from mineral resource bedrock special exception 1 MRB-1 to rural special exception 45 RU-45 and floodplain FP. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion at hand, please signify. All those opposed? Carried. Okay, next motion on the floor is moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Fody. We'll ask Councillor Ohlke to come back in the room. If he, Madam Clerk, can you give him a call? Maybe he has a cell phone. He wouldn't have been made aware of this anyways, because this was at the previous planning meeting as well. So we can move forward. We still have quorum. Moved by Councillor Maybe and seconded by Councillor Fody that council approve the zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject property from wrecking yard to WY to agriculture AG attached to the planning report number PL-019-20 as Exhibit E. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed? And that is carried. Okay, next one on the docket, moved by Councillor Fody, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that council approve the recommended zoning bylaw amendment for 831 and 847 Grippen Beach Lane as amended from report number PL-015-20. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify.
Madam
Hold on.
Mayor,
No.
Councillor Ohlke's just coming back in if he had any.
Councillor Ohlke, this is the motion that's on the floor in regards to 831 and 847 Grippen Beach Lane as amended from report number PL-015-20. Do you recall this report, or would you like to? Okay, so you're in favor. So all those opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Madam Clerk. And the next motion on the floor is moved by Councillor Modi, or I'm having a tough time tonight. Moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Fody, that council received planning and development report number PL-018-20 for information purposes. Discussion on this motion. Councillor Maybe, and we'll have Ms. Venditti on standby.
All I was going to ask your worship and through you is a little bit more background on it, because I know that this is a hot topic, particularly in this time of COVID, where we're not getting really good reception, including myself at my location. So I'm just wondering if there's any more information to be had other than what we're seeing in this proposal.
Madam Planner, would you like to speak to that?
Through your worship, in terms of where we're at, the study is moving along. There's a lot of moving parts right now. We are meeting with the working group weekly for updates on the work and getting updates from the consultants on a weekly basis. And we anticipate that we'll be bringing report forward or delegation to council likely in August to go over the recommendations of the report.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get another agenda up here so that I can.
Just as a follow-up, if you don't mind, your worship.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm just wondering, is there any dollars been tied in with this proposal or possible proposal yet, that we might have any dollars to really make something happen?
Go ahead, Madam Planner.
Thank you, through your worship. At this point, the scope of the work being done is a study to look at how to service the township and a very high level engineering design of the structure of what the infrastructure network would look like, as well as costing. So what we'll get back is a report that's going to tell us what it would cost to do the servicing work to have a broadband system installed. And I do note that Councillor Gurel has also may have some information to offer.
Councillor Gurel, would you like to leave a footnote there?
Without muddying the waters and without my usual verbal abuse to us all, let me just state that the working group initially looked at things and we talked to some providers, and the models that are out there from Eorn and others, they have a very difficult or a very challenging time dealing with our township. Anybody from Cogeco, Bell, whomever, and it's our geography and our thinly based population. So those models were all triple P, a public-private participation. Eorn, that has been their model for years. They put out requests, they get proposals. This township fell through the cracks for a few reasons, but mainly because we're just too darn challenging for that type of model. So I just want to put a bow on this and say, the reason for this study is so that we can establish some financial boundaries to take to upper level government. And I want to say, I am not convinced that the Eorn model, because it was sort of said the other day at the provincial government level that for Eastern Ontario, they were going to follow the Eorn model. I believe that that model will continue to fail for this township. So by going ahead with our own study, we have realistic high-level engineering estimates. The next step would be real costing, and I mean right down to the telephone pole. we had to have something in our hands to take to government besides a wish. And this is it is sectorable, it is divisible, it is scalable, but it is really putting us in the 21st century and the 22nd century for that matter. And also, I just want to say, our township is a dog's breakfast. To the north, you have the possibility of making a deal with a provider up there. To the Gananoque area, you can talk to Cogeco, and they could cherry pick. That fits the business model. I know those are terrible words, but it's their business model. Down where I live on the eastern corner, God knows, Bell doesn't do much down here. And I'm actually in the out of the Lansdowne district and into the Bell. So I hope that goes a little bit to mentioning why this report is important. We expect to have some very big numbers associated with this, but you can't be afraid of moving into the next century. And we have the ability to go and talk to upper level governments seriously and say that the other models do not work here. We need your help, and we're going to get it. And we need your help, and we're going to do this properly. We're not going to, as Gordon once said to me, we're not going to fight last year's battle. We want to do better than that, because we could spend 3 and 4 years upgrading to what? Last year. If we go ahead with this sort of thing, we will be so far ahead of the curve, it'll be exciting. So if anybody have any questions, I'll be glad to kind of summarize it more, but I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gorell, and we do appreciate your work on that advisory committee. The only other thing that I would like to point out just with the report, the details contained therein, this was discussed on a precursory point when we were in budgeting in December of 2019 and in January of 2020 when we finalized the budget, and the earmark in the budget was up to $50,000. So the budget was there for this. This wasn't something that we decided unilaterally to do, as indicated by some people out in the general public. But we have followed all the guidelines as to the letter. But that we are, thankfully, we considered moving this project ahead and not stalling it due to COVID. And I'm very sincerely glad that we did that, because there is further money that has come available at the provincial level as well that we may be able to tap into if we get our information back to us sooner rather than later. So I'm grateful to the work that the staff has been doing and along with the committee members to move this project forward. So I'll recognize Councillor Foti and then Councillor Ohlke.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, just a couple of comments. Obviously, COVID-19 and getting through that and back to norm, whatever norm may be from here on, is our first priority and should be. But overall, as a council, for the betterment of this whole township, this broadband issue should be our biggest goal, if we will, to fix this. It's been talked about, it's been kicked around for a number of years, a number of councils, and we can't blame anybody for that. But I think through Councillor Gorell's report that he just gave us, I'm really looking forward to hearing the tidbits we got here tonight. What my Director Venditti referred to as a possible presentation to us in August. And I think we need to keep in mind that we stay away from a cherry picking model of any kind. If we're not going to provide this to the whole township, I'll be the first one to back out. But I really like what I'm hearing here. Thank you.
Councillor Ohlke.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Gorell and the committee for thinking so far ahead. My own experience with this is if you go with a service provider, you're faced with a series of ever receding horizons. Well, if you just wait 6 months and give us $5 more million, you can have this. But oh wait, now we seem like we've avoided that, and that's very good. And the one caveat I would raise is that we might have to phase in things. We might not be able to deliver to the whole township at one time, but it would be progress to go, say, concession line by concession line, or however we did it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further comments or questions in regards to the PL report, Planning and Development Report number PL-018-20? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion at hand, please signify. All those opposed? Carried. Okay, so the next motion on the floor, moved by Councillor Fody, seconded by Councillor Maybe. Please bear with me, this is a long one. Whereas municipalities deliver essential services and infrastructure that support Canadians' quality of life, from the roads and the bridges that keep people and goods moving, local governments are building better lives for our residents. And whereas the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM, is offering asset management grants for municipalities, and whereas Public Sector Digest will work with staff to apply for a grant through FCM for costs related to the new software implementation project for asset management. And now, therefore, be it resolved that Council directs staff to apply for a grant opportunity from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program for asset management systems development in Leeds and the Thousand Islands. Be it further resolved that the Corporation of the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands commits to conducting the following activities in its proposed project submitted to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program to advance our asset management program: license of citywide software program, data work and implementation of citywide software, and asset management software training. And be it further resolved that the Corporation of the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands commits $40,500 from its budget towards the costs of this initiative. Madam Treasurer, did you want to speak to this motion before we take questions from the councillors?
Through your worship. So this is all money that's already been approved, and council's approved the purchase of the software. This is to help with, I guess, the second stage of the software that we haven't actually began yet. And so we're able to apply for funding because we haven't started that phase of the implementation. Public Sector Digest is going to help us write the application. And I know they've been very experienced in writing other funding applications, so that will be helpful for sure. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So just to summarize what you've said, that this is an additional funds that we would be receiving, we would not have to commit further funds outside of the budget that we've already approved. Is that correct, Madam Treasurer?
That's correct. So if we're successful in receiving this money, then that means that we'll be spending less out of the municipal modernization funding that we have sitting in our working fund reserve right now.
Excellent. Questions for the treasurer on this matter? Deputy Mayor Lackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the Director of Treasury. Are we still on schedule with our asset management plan?
Through Your Worship, it's hard to say right now if we're on schedule because we've been so preoccupied with COVID-19 and trying to basically just manage to get through the last several weeks or months. I don't have a detailed project plan that actually takes us out to next July, which I think is when the regulation comes into effect for what we need to do for the province for an updated asset management plan. To get to that point, I was really hoping that we'd have another person to help us, but as we all know, that was put on hold. So right now we're working with Citywide to get the asset data together, which is a first step. We are working on the project. At this point, it's hard for me to say whether we'll meet the regulation next year for what's required for that piece of the legislation or not.
Follow up, Deputy Mayor Lackey.
Thank you. I know it's only speculation, but do you think because of this, we might get a bit of time to surpass what they've given us?
Through Your Worship, so I was kind of thinking if they were going to do that, we might have heard that already because we've already heard a lot of other, the province has moved the assessment update that was supposed to happen January 1st for next year's taxes and some of the other things that have been announced. And I haven't seen or heard anything yet to say that they're going to delay the date that's in the asset management regulation, but that's not to say that might not happen. I'm not really sure. I haven't heard, like I said, I just haven't heard either way any indication of what, if that might get moved or not.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions or concerns for the treasurer on this? Councillor Garrell?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just clarification, I don't think I'm reading this correctly, and I just wanted to make sure I've got it right. In the statement toward the end, be it further resolved, it said the township commits to conducting the following activities. Does that mean that we are following, we are simply following what we put in the grant proposal, or are we following some policies of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities there? That was unclear to me. Maybe I'm just dense tonight, but is it just following the guidelines that we put into the grant proposal?
Through Your Worship. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to pull that back up. But I think what it's just saying is basically at a very high level that we're going to follow the steps that we were intending to follow in terms of implementing that part of the software.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for the treasurer in regards to this motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion at hand, please signify. All those opposed, carried. Thank you, councillors. Okay, and so the next motion that's on the floor is moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Fody. Whereas the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands and other municipalities based, sorry,
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Just two things before we move on to Councillor Jameson's motion.
Am I missing something in the agenda? I apologize if I am.
Well, just remember I talked to you about those additions. So with regards to Kendricks Park and the grants application, right, was going to.
Okay, so before I put this on the floor, actually, I'll just hang on to this. I apologize because my iPad died, my agenda died with it, so I have to toggle back screens. I apologize. So there are a few things that the Director of Community and Business Services had to talk about. So I'm not sure if we might need a motion at hand or not, but I would like Director Goodman to give us an update in regards to summer students, grant applications, day camp at Kendricks Park. There's a bit of laundry list. So if you could be brief as possible and we can move forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Your Worship. Very quickly, I just wanted to announce to Council that we were successful in obtaining funding through Canada Summer Jobs or Service Canada for 2 student positions. These 2 people were onboarded actually just Friday. We got letters back in. They were students who would have come in and they hit the ground running this week for both their third year returning students, but full funding for 8 weeks. So their contract is for 8 weeks as it stands, but full funding. We did get notification that we were successful in an application for another wage subsidy for a student. This is SEP or Summer Experience Program. It's designated for marketing. The caveat with this one, and I do understand that Council had provided direction for no summer hiring without 100% subsidy, we would be able to offer a student 15 weeks employment, 21 hours a week, $15 an hour at a cost to the municipality of approximately $600. So I wanted to put that forward for Council's consideration. The benefit being that it would allow our unpaid co-op student to transition into a temporary contract position with us and continue to bring value in terms of marketing local business. So the challenge being is that I do need to return the contract for SEP tomorrow. We just got it middle of last week, which didn't allow me the opportunity to get a report to Council. I would need authorization in principle. We would sign and return the contract. However, I do recognize that there may need to be some additional consideration. We can always withdraw our side afterwards. That was number 1.
Okay. I'll wait till, do you want to ask the question or do you want to let her finish, Councillor Foti? We'll go ahead, Director Goodman, and then we'll get back to that.
And this sort of follows along the same lines, and we've been having some discussions at the staff level regarding Kendricks Park. We have hosted the Frontenac Arch Biosphere Camp there for 2 years now. We additionally recognize that where there might not be a lot of other opportunities for play within our municipality or for travel, that Kendricks Park with the beach and open areas might be heavily attended this year. We have crunched some numbers, and again, it's a bit of a timing issue. So perhaps some sort of nod, please proceed in principle, and we can bring back more detailed reporting. If we were to staff the park approximately 45 hours a week with projected revenues, and this is cut to reflect, you know, the shortened season, we might be able to run a break even. Now, again, that's anticipating looking at students, but staff are aware that staff should maybe also be allowed the opportunity to come back from reduced hours to full-time hours. The budget impact, though, as a heads up, would be significantly more. Again, we just kind of want to get council thinking about this, get some sort of early indication, perhaps, as how you may wish to proceed.
I see you, Councillor Ohlke.
Finally, just on the heels of that as well, I do recognize that there's been a lot of conversation about public washrooms and having them open and available. With the announcement today that we're going to see additional shops opening, additional recreational facilities opening, such as beaches and splash pads, that might put additional pressure on current staff levels or our ability to provide a service. So again, we're looking for some direction from council in terms of what they would like us to consider as we move ahead and look at options for staffing parks or not, and if so, how so. And if there was any threshold for costs. Of course, you guys know I'm game to go out and see if we can find any additional money, but I'm not sure that at this point, you know, how quickly we can turn that around. And that would be everything in a nutshell. Thank you.
So there's 3 things that Ms. Goodman spoke about: the grant, sorry, not the grant application. This was the the students that were approved. So the 2 students that were approved, there's 1 student that we have the ability to approve, but it would require $600 approximately on our part. And then whether or not we move forward with a Kendricks Park day camp hosted by the Frontenac Arch Biosphere. Okay, just that was the nutshell that I wanted to put it in. Councillor Foti, then Councillor Ohlke, and then Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Goodwin. Can you give me the numbers, repeat those numbers again, I should say, on that additional student that requires a cost from our end?
Absolutely.
You said 15 weeks, 21 hours a week. Is that right?
Yeah, sorry, forgive me here. I'm trying to get my monitor to the right one here. There we go. My apologies. Technology is a little slow here today. We could consider a 12-week position, 21 hours a week. So that would be 3 full days at $15 an hour.
But it requires us to put in a $600 top up.
$575.60 once we accommodate for mandatory employment related costs.
Just to follow up, that's our total cost requirement for the duration?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I guess where I would reflect quickly at responding to this, we've got a number of full-time employees sitting at home waiting to be called back. And I have a real problem with bringing an additional anybody, student or otherwise, on board when our full-time employees are not. And I'll just leave it at that for now.
Councillor Ohlke, you're next in line.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you for Ms. Goodman and anyone else who kick it around. I'm wondering, managing the sites, is it impossible to register, put up a registration system? If you wish to use Kendricks Park, you must book it. Would that be impossible to staff? Now, if Frontenac Arch Biosphere is running a course, perhaps we could say you got to manage your own registration, but no more than X number of people may attend. And as regards washrooms in places like Furnace Falls, very difficult to control those at the best of times, as you know. Just a question and some food for thought. Thank you.
Mhm. Absolutely, and through you, your worship. The scheduling might be a bit challenging. Really what this is trying to consider, and again, this is in very early stages, but before we, really put pen to paper, I wanted this kind of input, would be to make sure that those washrooms were open and available for the park and the camp participants, especially in the peak of the day, and it would allow staffing to be on site to maintain that. The health unit is recommending that public washrooms be cleaned every 2 hours.
Okay, Councillor, maybe?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Ms. Goodman. Part of my question was answered there. The additional cleaning to the bathrooms. Is there going to be a dedicated person who's actually monitoring the bathrooms and making sure that they're clean? And also, any participants that come to the Arch Biosphere, are they going to be screened prior to actually being allowed on the property every day, similar to what we are in our municipalities' buildings already? To ensure that nobody's been in contact with anybody with COVID and the transmission of that, and or does it even play into this scheme of things? Thank you.
Certainly, and thank you, Councillor Maybe, through you, your worship. Public washrooms do need to be cleaned every 2 hours. Again, that's the recommendation. So without appropriate staffing, I would be very hesitant to open. I would further be cognizant about posting a sign, use at your own risk. That's recognizing that we're saying, hey, we recognize there's risk, but go ahead anyways, which could have future implications to us as a municipality. So unless we can confirm that we would have staff available, whoever that is, in whatever formulation, again, we're still looking at other options. As for the camp, I do know in speaking with the camp coordinator that they are following the recommended guidelines in terms of managing the number of people who would be on site, social distancing, check-ins. If you're sick, please stay home, for example. So again, that's kind of their ballywalk to manage. It's our facility to provide. And so we just wanted to look at options as to what that might look like.
I will just add just my 2 cents is that I do believe that after a number of months of being cooped up in people's homes, that I do believe this beach will be heavily used this summer by families, especially needing that respite, because obviously family vacations of any length or distances are going to be canceled. So people are going to be looking for opportunity. Having said that, recognizing we were trying to the recommendations that were brought forward by the senior management team to reduce our overhead costs were taken into account and applied. Having said that, the CAO has direction even through that reduction that when required, that it is his call to bring back people when needed. It wasn't to make those staffing reductions forever. Those were temporary solutions to mitigating overhead costs. But also now that the province is providing us further information in regards to things that are opening up, the CAO has also turned his mind along with senior management to return to work protocols and staffing coming back into the office on a more regular basis, while staff have been working all of this time, but more of a in-house, back in the office scenario. But going back to the whole Kendricks Park thing, we cannot open the park without having washrooms. It's a non-starter. I can't in good conscience support something like opening it and having the washrooms closed. There's been a number of reports of other places, beaches and day park use, where these things have been closed and people are urinating and defecating in amongst cars and bushes and what have you, and that's a health hazard in its own right. So if we're going to open this up, we'll need the staff to turn their minds to how this works, and we'll have to trust that they'll come back to us with the plan of action. But I do believe that Kendricks Beach, being one of our gems, that will allow people to enjoy the outdoors and have a little bit of respite, especially when the summer months really heat up. So, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, using the numbers provided by Ms. Goodman, it pencils out in my math at $15.97 a day for this student for the 36 days they'd be employed, if my math is correct. That's a pretty cheap employee. The flip side, as I said, I can't imagine our own workforce would want to come back and jeopardize their current financial status for the sake of 3 days of employment. They're certainly not going to come back for any $16 a day. I know you indicated, Ms. Goodman, you needed an answer on this tomorrow, right?
We have a, pardon me, thank you, and through you, Your Worship, I do need to have a signed contract returned tomorrow. And that being the case, we can sign it and send it back. But if council wishes to not proceed with this opportunity, we can rescind our need for the funding in future.
So basically she can send the application in, and if we change our mind, we can send it back.
Mm-hmm.
We're not committed to it.
Well, with that in mind, then I would be in favor of it. I would throw some of this decision making back to our CAO and Director of Operations, who have our current employees under their wing for the most part, as to how they would weigh in on this decision. I know it's ultimately ours, but I mean, you have a better feel for the employees and their current status.
CAO, do you want to speak to this?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you. Thank you, Councillor Fody. Your comment is well received for sure. What we committed to doing was not just with the COVID related things, but on every level, was to be more transparent from staff to council. And so while I recognize that I do have some discretion with respect to staff, I wanted to make sure that there were no surprises to council and that we are being upfront and open with them at every turn of events, so that nobody gets a phone call from a constituent saying, hey, there's new students riding lawnmowers and what's going on? I thought there was a hiring freeze. So we wanted to be upfront and make sure that you are in the loop. We are considering this. We're having, as Ms. Goodman had mentioned, there's been a number of conversations at the senior management team about staffing and going forward. It's just out of perhaps an overabundance of caution, but also for a wish of being absolutely clear with everybody that that we're bringing this matter before you at this point.
Deputy Mayor, you had your hand up?
I did, and thank you. Just more along those lines to the CAO. I support this as far as the students concerned, but as far as our full-time staff and their diminished responsibilities, could that be seen as constructive dismissal?
It's at this point, if we're talking about Kendricks Park and offering some additional hours to people to go and staff, it's not a mandatory thing. What I think we could propose is that people would go and if they wanted to pick up some hours, then that's fine. It would be available on a first come first served basis to the affected staff that are on half time. I don't think it would be a constructive dismissal. Basically because we're going to pay them the rate that they are making as in their regular jobs. The concern that we have in doing this is, rather than paying a summer student minimum wage, it all of a sudden becomes quite an expensive proposition when we bring regular full-time staff to do this. But and as you say, you know, we're watching every penny, and we're here talking about $600 for one student. if we go with the staff route, and I think in good conscience, we have to offer them at least the opportunity to take the hours if they wish to, then the cost is going to be substantially higher. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any further discussion on the points that the director has brought forward? I think there's no need for a motion. I think it was more for information purposes at this particular point, but to, as in the words of the CAO, to be transparent about what's going on and with staffing levels. And I do know that there's been disgruntled taxpayers upset about current lengths of grasses and parks, the state of parks. And while I can appreciate that they don't look like they usually do, we've been running ragged. The staff that have been here, I shouldn't say we, it's not me, but the staff that are here have been working hard to just keep ahead of it, because we have had some rain which has brought on the grass quite quickly, but that having an additional couple of students will make a difference for sure. We still, again, may not have it at the levels that we're used to, but that is what we were approved for. And that's not to say that if there was other funding opportunities that presented themselves between now and the end of June, that we couldn't take advantage of those opportunities as well to further secure funding for 100% if it is available. So that's what we leave in the hands of the very capable senior management team and the CAO. So I think, Ms. Goodman, you have the direction that you require for this evening, and that we'll be anticipating a further report later on. And Director Goheen, I'm sure you're happy to have those extra summer students out there mowing, taking the pressure off your regular staff. And hopefully we can see our way through this summer and maybe be normal next summer, and whatever normal means. So thank you for your attention to that. So I'm going to put the next one on the floor, and I'll ask that that the conversation be brief on it. It does require attention, but and then we'll call a recess before we go in camera. So moved by Councillor Mabey and seconded by Councillor Foti, whereas the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands and other municipalities face long-term COVID-driven fiscal challenges, requiring them to creatively rationalize services delivered internally and financed externally. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Council strongly recommends that TLTI Library in its strategic planning exercise study the potential harmonizing options with other area library services to ensure a long-term stability and viability for the TLTI library users. Mr. Jameson, do you want to speak to this as briefly as possible? And then we'll take further questions from other members of Council.
Your Worship, I have nothing to add.
Fair enough. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Mabey?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Basically, this is just an exploratory option for them to look at what options they have within the rural area, and not a mandatory they must. Am I correct?
It's that they, whereas the Township believes that recommends that the TLTI Library in its strategic planning exercise studied potential harmonizing options with other library services. It's not a you shall or you must.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to be clear just in case it came back later on.
Absolutely. Councillor Ohlke, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I'm a little reluctant on a motion like this. There's an awareness in the library board that at one time Sealy's Bay and Lyndhurst branches were actually part of a union library with Rideau Lakes, or the precursor municipality up there. This has been discussed in the sense of looking at union boards or other options. I wonder if we're not telling them how to suck eggs here, and that might be offensive. Thank you.
Councillor Jameson and Councillor Lackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the course of strategic planning and not-for-profit organizations, one of the things that you learn is that sometimes all the options have to be considered, even the one that says, well, we're going to shut the whole thing down. I'm not talking about the library, I'm talking about strategic planning and not-for-profits. If we, and this is really just the point, if we find ourselves facing a challenge into 2021, 2022 with respect to our revenues coming out of this COVID-19 challenge, which is far from over in every respect, it's going to be incumbent upon us internally, that is within the township, to be looking at other options for all the services that we do and provide to the community. And it should not be lost on anyone that there's going to be challenges with respect to funding external things, whether it's conservation authorities or anything else, including the libraries. So at this stage, why not recommend that we consider all options? I'm aware that at one time Lenders and Sealy's Bay were part of another organization, but I think the conditions what we're facing, you know, this is a cultural paradigm shift of huge proportions we're facing, and we may face financials. So why not recommend that our library, along with all the departments in the township, begin to think completely outside of a box that may not exist anymore? So it is not preconditioned. It is just simply saying, think beyond the space within which you exist now. And that's the point. It's not sucking eggs. I take a little bit of umbrage to that.
Deputy Mayor Lackey had something to ask or add?
Thank you. And through you, it's along the same lines. I mean, we're all part of the county. You know, we thought outside the box with the St. Lawrence corridor. So why can't we do kind of the same thing with the library? For years in fire, we have agreements with other municipalities for coverage. Maybe we need to look for coverage in the library.
Okay, so the motion on the floor, unless, oh, sorry, I apologize, Councillor Ohlke, and then Councillor Grohl, did you have your hand up too? Yeah, okay. Sorry, Councillor Ohlke and then Councillor Grohl.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, and I recommend that my esteemed colleague, Councillor Jameson, not have too much of a helping of umbrage. I speak in a certain manner, and I'm an old soldier, and sometimes my speech is less than diplomatic. I'm aware of that. I just would point out that the library board is aware of the situation. They have discussed other operations or other forms of operations. I don't think these thoughts are in isolation or strange to anybody else who's involved in any kind of public service delivery. Thank you.
Councillor Grohl.
Just very quickly, I guess I was biased in my thinking of who they'd be thinking about amalgamating or unionizing with, but we have Gananoque, we have Brockville sitting right beside us. Gananoque, we surround them. So do we just leave it wide open as to, I mean, that's getting pretty broad. What do they do? Do they put out a, I don't know, do they sit down with those library people? I'm not sure how this works. I don't mind the idea, but I don't see how it works. But I would vote in favor of it. There you go.
So unless anybody else has anything to add, I'll add my 2 cents and then we can call the vote. So I think that the motion, while definitely well-intentioned, is just another reminder, and I know it might feel like we are beating the poor library board down, but at the same time, I think that for many years that we often sort of do things the way they've always been done, and I realize that the library board is aware of other models and has perhaps looked at things, but perhaps they haven't looked at Gananoque, or perhaps they haven't looked at Maorytown at the front of Young Library. Those are very small municipalities that are operating one single branch. And you know what, I know that amalgamation, when it happened in the late 90s, was a huge exercise and wasn't necessarily a way to save money, but it's about pooling resources and services. So I think that the way it's worded is that it's potential harmonizing options is really what it's encouraging. And it's certainly not prescriptive, saying you have to do this. So it is just further recommendation, perhaps, that the library board look at other ways, and not just to the north, but to the east and the west. So how that looks like, Councillor Gorell says, is really up to the board, but it's about the strategic planning exercise that they're about to go through as well. So that's my 2 cents. So seeing no other comments or questions, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion at hand, please signify. All those opposed, carried. Okay, so I did skip over my mayor's update before the notice of the motion, and I apologize. Obviously, without having my agenda in front of me, I'm a bit lost. I have to keep flipping screens and then I lose my place. But a couple of things that I want to remind everybody of: the fire services study that is being done, the grant that we received from the province. They have gone out looking for input. So it's on the website, it's on our social media channels. Please share. It also went out to media. I believe it was shared by the radio station and print media as well. So if you have anybody who's interested in fire services, or has ever had a fire, or hopefully never has a fire, please have them come and complete the survey. As you may be aware, the province has indicated that more businesses and services will be opening up on June the 12th. Please allow the staff to plan as much as possible to open our township facilities, and that the safety of everyone is our priority. Staff will be sharing their plans as soon as possible as they work towards opening, and also please support our local businesses as they continue to open, and just remind the residents to please be patient as everyone is adjusting to this new normal. As well, there's a reminder to parents of graduating students. There is a digital yearbook that's going around. And again, these are on our social media channels as well as our website, I believe. So if you have a student who is graduating either grade 8, grade 12, they can be added to that digital wall and be celebrated there, as it is a different year for sure. The Operation and Public Works team is extremely busy. Road and park maintenance continues. The Russell Road Bridge project is on track, and other capital work is continuing to be lined up. I know that somebody mentioned some roadside mowing that I heard today. Brock had his road graded and treated, so everybody's happy there. So we got 2 thumbs up from Councillor Gorell. You know, it's definitely been a strange year on every level possible, and we appreciate the efforts of the roads people as well as the landfill people, who really our landfill attendants are the ones that are taking the brunt of this COVID crisis, because their numbers are through the roof and they're seeing more and more people every day. So with that, unless there's any other announcements that anybody else wants to make, Councillor Jameson.
I apologize, Your Worship. I just wanted to thank Ms. Goodman and the department for organizing the flowers. Sabara took charge of planning them. We appreciated staff on site to help us with that. I planted the flowers in front of the library myself. I'd like to thank operations for taking care of the dock so quickly. It was in pretty bad shape in the infamous Sealy's Bay dock. We appreciate somebody coming down and fixing that. I'd also like to thank planning, the responding so quickly to a couple of challenges in Sealy's Bay. I would like to encourage the other villages to take advantage of this flower thing. Is at the end of the day, we actually were pushing back a little bit. But, you know, we had a good time doing it. And we appreciate, even though it rained and all that, but we appreciate the opportunity to get together. I think that's part of the challenge right now with our social distancing. So that's all I wanted to say. And my thanks to staff for getting a lot done in a really challenging time.
Thank you, Councillor Jameson. And one last announcement. It is Councillor Fode's birthday today, and he's officially retirement age, but that doesn't mean he's retiring. So he's with us, until the next election anyways. And I'm sure that they won't be able to get rid of you that easily at your day job. But I still, as I said earlier this evening, I still think of him as 45 years old and traipsing around Ontario to Holstein shows and having fun and that sort of thing. And I never grew up, and neither did he, so we're good. Anyways, so with that, we'll take a 5-10 minute recess, and then we'll reconvene for the in-camera portion. And so, Madam Clerk, if we're putting ourselves on hold, and then we'll reconvene actually at 8:15. Please and thank you. Thank you. Please mute your computer.